Thank you, Dr. Twinkle, and thank you, Chairman Scientific Committee, for the last session. But the advantages will overshoot by 10 minutes, and nobody will come and kick us out. So the enthusiasm is great, and we'll use this 10-15 minutes extra. I hope today the lunch also will not be crowded, so you'll get your lunch quicker. All the third generation formulas, they're based on ELP. Dr. Asnani, he just talked to you about the ELP. And somehow I feel now the one more thing that is going to be added to that entire list of 7 is how much did the patient pay. I think that is also going to be a very important factor of what we have to do. So ELP always varies according to axial length of the globe. We are understanding the anatomy now so better and better. Till now it was only a 22 millimeter or 24 millimeter globe. But now we are trying to actually, we might even measure where we have to measure on the retina. For eyes less than 22 millimeters, the ELP always is little anterior than the presumed ELP for the third generation formulas. Understand? So we are now talking very specifically about the eyes. So for eyes less than 22 millimeters, it's quite obvious and common sense. You know, this is a smaller eye. So the effective lens position is going to be a bit anterior. But we never thought of this. And the third generation of formulas like SRKT and Holaday one and results in since the lens, which is a convex lens, is going to be anterior, it's going to result in hyperopia. So never use SRK. In fact, there's one small message we all want to give you is SRK is now out of the window. I am sure nobody uses SRK. The least you can do is like Dr. Priyadarshini says is SRKT.
Even SRK should not be used in short eyes also. They also give hyperopia. So any way of SRK should not be used in short eyes.
Yeah. And for short eyes, Hoffer-Q and Haigis formula, and with this all variables, the A0, the A1 and A2 optimized, this is something that we can recommend. Okay, let's talk about primary polypseudophakia. You know, when the calculated IOL power exceeds that's available in the market, what are our choices? The placement of single IOL is not possible, so what do? Right? We create a polypseudophakia, that is, we might end up implanting 2 IOLs. This is typically seen in patients with axial length less than 20 and often with a hyperopic spherical equivalent of +8 or greater. So many other factors besides this +8 also form a part of this. I would just like to enlighten you. In fact, this also I understood only after taking up this course, that there are 6 steps to calculate the power of an IOL whenever we are creating a polypseudophakia. I never knew this before some time. What is step 1? Of course, measure the axial length as accurately as possible, because even a relatively small axial length error in extreme axial hyperopia can result in a significant post-operative refractive error. And I think let's go back to basics. If you err by 1 millimeter in axial length, the IOL power calculation goes haywire by 3 diopters. And if you err by 1 millimeter on the cornea, you can go wrong by, yes, was it 6 for axial length? I also forgot. 3 for axial length and immersion. Okay, another the axial length is in this setting is best measured using the optical biometry. Of course, this is in our country a bit of a far-fetched thing. So let's concentrate on the immersion type. The immersion 10 millihertz ACM biometry is a reasonable but of course less accurate alternative. You can always go ahead and have a center, a neutral center in your city where there is an optical biometer or something, all these gadgets, and you can go ahead and refer your such peculiar or typical patients. What is step 2? Calculate the total IOL power needed at the plane of the capsular bag. Now, you might not necessarily put both the IOLs inside the capsular bag, but this is the second step. For IOL power calculations in the setting of extreme hyperopia, the Holaday 2 formula is recommended, and the Hoffer-Q or a fully optimized version of the Haigis formula are other reasonable alternatives, but the first choice is Holaday. Other 2 variable third generation theoretic formulas such as SRKT and Holaday 1 will typically call for less IOL power than needed, resulting in post-operative hyperopia. You can go ahead and try to add a couple of diopters, and I'm sure you're not going to put a multifocal IOL in such patients. So what you can do is you are putting a monofocal, rather they have a -1 or -2 rather than a +0.5. So at our practice before a few years, that's what used to happen. My staff would always choose something which is not 0, but always choose something like a -1 or a -2, because at least we can tell the patient that, man, you're not going to have a reading glasses. But if the patient ends up on plus 0.5 or plus 1, you are totally in a bad position. So always, if you are using the less expensive machines, try to err on the minus sides. Okay, this is something a bit controversial. Surgery for the non-dominant eye can be carried out first, targeting a refractive outcome of approximately minus 0.75 diopters. This is something known as a monovision. But finding a non-dominant eye becomes a bit difficult because these are not virgin eyes. One eye might be having cataract gone to -3, and so that might eye become non-dominant. But yes, if you are doing clear lens extraction or Californian cataracts, you can find out the non-dominant eye. What is the idea? The idea is of monovision. You always try to create N is for near, N means non-dominant, and D means dominant is for distance. So distance we aim for nearly emmetropia, and non-dominant, in fact, in our practice we aim for -1.25 also, and that works very well. Whenever a patient is counseled for a multifocal and says he cannot afford a multifocal, I say, then we jump to another thing. We will try to give you some spectacle independence by giving a monovision. Right? So trial power for subsequent surgery on the dominant eye can then be fine-tuned. This is also very important. If you're lucky that the patient is getting operated both the eyes by you, you can use that. Total IOL capsular bag power required is plus 47 in the right eye and 46 in the left eye. How you can customize is target refraction of 0.25 and -0.25. These are rough calculations. In primary polio pseudophakia, the Alcon MA50BM, which is a negative shape factor, is the preferred lens. Now, the physics behind this is that majority of IOL power on the have IOL power on the posterior surface. Now, the design of this lens allows for the lowest possible profile at the level of anterior lens capsule. Step 3. Calculate the residual IOL power. The highest power currently available for MA50BM is plus 30. We are talking about MA50 because this is the preferred IOL, like I said before. And with this lens alone, will come up short in terms of the total IOL power diopter. Say, for example, in the previous 46 diopters or 47, now we need another plus 17 diopters. So where to get it? We cannot even do it on the cornea. So if the total IOL power required in the bag, now we are moving to two different areas in the antechamber. One is going to be bag and another is going to be sulcus. So if the total IOL power required in the bag is say plus 47 in the right eye, and we have maximal IOL power available is say 30. So what are we left with? 17, and in 16 in the other eye. Now determine the power adjustment for the anterior or the ciliary sulcus lens. How do we do that? Because of its more anterior position, we all know that we subtract. Sometimes when you put an anterior chamber IOL, what do? We subtract by about 3 diopters from the posterior chamber. The same principle is applied here, but the only thing is the shift is only very minimal. Bag, sulcus, and anterior chamber. The amount of power reduction required when moving an IOL from the capsular bag to the ciliary sulcus is proportional to the IOL power and can be determined by using the refractive versions formula. So I am adding now one more confusion to your small brain. Note that this power reduction for primary pseudophakia is different than what would normally be expected in the setting of routine cataract surgery. Why? Because this is a special situation. So, okay, this is a residual bag IOL power calculation. Plus 30 to plus 25, you subtract minus 1.5. All this information, if you need, you can leave your email ID with Dr. Twinkle and he will be very glad to give you. Otherwise, you can even find it in the literature. But if the residual bag power is plus 25 to plus 15, then you subtract only minus 1. So a lot depends on the IOL power itself. Step 5. Calculate the power of the anterior IOL now. Now, as we remember, it was plus 17 right eye, plus 16 left eye. Sulcus IOL power adjustment is about minus 1. So the second IOL in the sulcus will be 16 diopters. Is it clear now? Step 6. Now select the appropriate polypseudophakia lens pair. So we are now not talking about maths. We have come to a derivation. Say we want to implant 16 diopters of lens, but what material, what type? So that is what we are going to discuss in the next step. It is recommended that different IOL materials in different locations be used for the creation of a polypseudophakic lens pair. So it has to be a compatible pairing. And how do we do that? With current technology, the preferred approach is to place two IOLs of different materials in different locations, right? Well, you need that, no, X and Y. So a lower power, thin, biconvex silicon lens in the ciliary sulcus, and a higher power negative shape factor acrylic lens in the capsular bag. Silicon lenses are going to be a bit thinner, and I think at this moment of time, all the sulcus fixated these IOLs are only silicon. So they have a special loop, and probably they preferred. There are acrylic ones. The Sulcoflex is all acrylic also is available. Yeah, but then this says that it should be silicon because it is thinner.
No, and second thing that you cannot use the same material for this polypseudophakia. Suppose you are putting two acrylics, then the interface will be a problem.
And why this pairing of the material? Because it decreases the pigment dispersion, transillumination, intermittent uveitis, and all that stuff. Now, very long eyes, so this was for very short eyes. Now, this is for very long eyes. The incidence of posterocephaloma increases after the axial length of 26.5 diopters. We all know that. And for axial length of more than 33 millimeters, there is 70% of chances of staphyloma. In fact, I would say because there was a staphyloma, they were being measured as 33. It's the corollary, right? Because it was a staphyloma, we measured it as 33. Probably it was not. The most posterior portion of the globe, the anatomic axial length, may not correspond with the center of the macula, which is the reflective axial length. Simplest method by which to measure axial length in the setting of a posterior staphyloma is by optical biometry. And because the patient looks directly at the red fixation light, and the axial length measurement will typically be to the center of the macula. But somehow I feel that in our immersion also we are pretty accurate, because there also the patient is fixating at something, yes, but he doesn't have such a good fixation target as an optical. If you don't have an optical biometer, an immersion vector A and B scan can be used to measure. I think Dr. Priyadarshi talked, or Dr. Nishan talked about this. This is perhaps a very good attachment. But don't you consider AB scan will be as expensive as an optical biometer? I'm not sure of the price. So axial length 24.5 to 26, SRKT and Holiday works well. Axial length more than 26 millimeters, consideration of SRKT and Holiday do. I'll quickly run through, we are running time. Okay, silicon fill eyes, I think. There are two types of silicon eyes, and you have axial length and you have a velocity which you can adjust. This is for 1000 milli parts per second and 5000 milli 1040. Frankly, in silicon eye filled eyes, you don't need to be very accurate. They hardly see much. Each component of the eye has to be distinctly individually measured, actually at 1532 millimeters per second, and the true axial length calculated using the velocity conversion equation. What was once a time-consuming, difficult, and sometimes inaccurate measurement by ultrasonography has become very simple by optical biometer. We also have to do adjustments to intraocular lens power. Like Holiday and others, they have recommended that biconvex intraocular lenses should not be placed biconvex intraocular lenses in patients with silicon oil in the vitreous cavity. But I think most of the biconvex lenses are now only the PMMA lenses. The foldable ones are not biconvex. That's what I believe. And PMMA convex plano lens with the plano side oriented so it's facing towards the vitreous cavity, and preferably over an intact posterior capsule, of course. And the biconvex intraocular lens could lose between a third and a half of its refractive power if it comes into contact with the silicon oil. That's the reason we need a good surgery. There is presently no method that can be used to accurately carry out IOL power calculations prior to corneal transplantation. An optimum method is do keratoplasty along with cataract, leave aphakia for 3 months, calculate the IOL power by spectral version formula, and a second stage IOL implantation. But if you are going to do an in the bag implantation, this is going to be difficult. So you have to take your choice. If you are going to be able to create a bag, the best thing is try to implant some kind of IOL, give him a power. If you are happy, patient is happy, go ahead and do nothing. But if you end up in a very high refractive surprise, you can always go in and put another IOL. So you have to make your choice whether you want to do a primary aphakia or make him pseudophakic and later on do the correction if required. Thank you for your attention.